My rich wife made me sign a humiliating prenup 8 years ago because her parents thought I was a loser. Now I'm 5 times richer than them, and they want the agreement to disappear. I'm 37 years old. I own an electronics company that's been doing incredibly well the last few years, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago with my in-laws basically exploded my family life in a way I never imagined. The thing is, these people made me sign a prenup 8 years ago when I married their daughter Nicole, because according to them, I was a nobody who just wanted their money. And now that it turns out I'm 5 times richer than them, suddenly they want that agreement to disappear. Can you believe it? But anyway, let me start from the beginning, because otherwise this doesn't make sense. I met Nicole like 11 years ago. I was 26 and working in sales for a mid-sized tech company. Nothing special, but they paid me decent. She worked in marketing for another company, and we met at one of those boring business conferences where everyone pretends to be interested in PowerPoints about market strategies. The truth is, we hit it off immediately. You know, that chemistry that sometimes just exists. We started dating, and things went well from the start. I mean, she was smart, funny, ambitious, everything I was looking for in someone. What I didn't know at the time was that her parents, Frederick and Helen, owned a pretty successful real estate firm, like the kind that have buildings and properties all over the city. Nicole never made a big deal out of it, which I appreciated, because I've known rich people who won't stop reminding you of it every 5 minutes. And the first months with Nicole were great, but I had this constant restlessness at my job. I'd always wanted to have my own business, specifically in electronics, because since I was a kid, I was the type who took everything apart in the house to see how it worked, which drove my mom, Barbara, crazy. My parents were middle class. My dad, George, was a high school football coach, and my mom managed a coffee shop, so we never had money to spare, but we didn't lack anything either. The point is, I'd been saving up and planning this business for years, and after like a year of being with Nicole, I decided it was time. I quit my job. She supported me completely, even helped me financially the first few months when things were tight, which was incredible of her, and I'll never forget it. The business started slowly, as it usually happens. I was working from our apartment, building and selling customized electronic equipment, doing repairs, that kind of thing. Nicole kept working and basically supported us while I built the company. Frederick and Helen, her parents, had already met me by then, and let's say they weren't impressed. The first time I went to their house, which was a huge mansion on the outskirts, Helen asked me what I did, and when I told her I was starting my own business, I saw how she exchanged that look with Frederick. You know, that look that says, "Oh no, our daughter is dating a loser." Frederick didn't even try to hide it. He basically ignored me the whole dinner and only talked to Nicole about people I didn't know and places I'd never been. It was awkward as hell. But Nicole and I kept going. We moved in together. The business started growing little by little. I got some contracts with small companies, and when I turned 29, I proposed. She said yes immediately. We were super happy, and we started planning the wedding for the following year. That's when things got weird with her parents. Like 2 months after we got engaged, Frederick invited us to dinner at his house, just the 4 of us, and I thought maybe they were finally going to give me a chance, like accept me into the family. How naive I was, seriously. We arrived and Helen had prepared this super elaborate dinner. Frederick opened an expensive bottle of wine, and I was thinking, well, this is promising. But then, just when we finished eating, Frederick put a folder on the table and said, "Brian, we need to talk about something important before the wedding." He opened the folder, and inside was like a 50-page prenup. I froze, literally didn't know what to say. Frederick started explaining with this super condescending voice that it was simply a precaution, that Nicole had a considerable trust fund, that the family had properties and businesses to protect, and that this was what was done in families with resources. Helen added, with a fake smile, that it wasn't anything personal, that they just wanted to make sure everyone was protected. Nicole was visibly uncomfortable. I could see how she was gripping the napkin in her lap, but she didn't say anything at that moment. I read through the document right there, and basically it said everything that was mine stayed mine, everything that was Nicole's stayed hers, and if we ever got divorced, everyone left with their own. But the part that really insulted me was a clause that said any financial support Nicole gave me for my business Had to be repaid in case of divorce, like it was a loan. I mean, they were already assuming I was going to fail, that I was going to depend on their daughter, and that eventually we'd get divorced and I'd try to keep their money. I felt humiliated. Like, is this how they see me? As a gold digger who's only with their daughter for money? Frederick said they needed me to sign it before the wedding, or there would be no wedding, simple as that. Nicole finally spoke and said, "Dad, this is ridiculous. Brian isn't with me for money." But Frederick interrupted her and said, "Sweetheart, this isn't negotiable. It's protecting our family." I wanted to get up and tell them to go to hell. Seriously, but I looked at Nicole and could see she was trapped between her family and me. She asked me quietly if we could talk about it in private. We went to the garden, and there she told me she was so sorry, that she knew it was horrible, but that if I didn't sign, her parents would make the wedding impossible, and probably cut her off. She asked me if we could just sign it, that she knew it wasn't like that the document meant nothing to her, but that it would make things easier with her parents. The truth is, I was about to end everything right there, but I loved Nicole and it wasn't her fault for having parents like that. I told her, okay, I'll sign it, but that I would never forget how her parents made me feel. We signed the agreement that night, both of us, because Nicole also had to sign it, obviously. Frederick seemed satisfied, like he'd won something, and Helen said with that sweet, fake voice that it was best for everyone. We left that house and Nicole cried the whole way to our apartment, telling me she was sorry, that her parents were like that they'd eventually change their mind about me. I didn't say much, just drove in silence, feeling the rage burning inside me. We got married 6 months later. It was a big, expensive wedding that Nicole's parents insisted on paying for, probably to show their status or something. Frederick and Helen were polite to me during the ceremony, but distant, like they were fulfilling a social duty rather than celebrating their daughter marrying someone who loved her. My parents came. They looked a bit out of place among all those rich people, but they were happy for me. My dad told me at the reception that Frederick had asked him what he did, and when he said he was a football coach, Frederick basically lost interest in the conversation. Typical. The first years of marriage were good despite her parents. Nicole and I were happy. We moved to a bigger house. We had our son Cameron when I was 32. And my business kept growing steadily. I worked like crazy, like 12 or 14 hours a day, expanding the company, hiring people, getting bigger contracts. Nicole eventually left her job to take care of Cameron. But she always supported me in everything, never made me feel bad about the hours I dedicated to the business. Her parents visited from time to time, always with that attitude of superiority, asking me how the business was going with a tone that made it clear they expected me to fail any minute. I tolerated them for Nicole and for Cameron, who adored his grandparents because they showered him with gifts and attention when they came. Fast forward to like 2 years ago. The business exploded. Literally took off in a way I never imagined. I got a huge contract with a nationwide chain of stores, then another with an international distribution company, and suddenly I was making more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I hired an accountant, a lawyer, expanded the offices. Everything grew exponentially. Nicole was incredibly proud. My parents couldn't believe it, and I was on a roller coaster of constant work, but it was worth it. I did some calculations with my accountant, and it turned out my net worth was now approximately 5 times greater than Frederick and Helen's. 5 times. The guy who, according to them, was going to be a failure dependent on their daughter was now significantly richer than them. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frederick and Helen noticed the change, obviously. They saw the new house we bought, the car Nicole drove, the vacations we took. They started asking more about the business, but I gave them vague answers because, frankly, they didn't deserve to know the details after how they'd treated me. Like 6 months ago, they came to visit us on a Sunday. They showed up without really warning, like they called an hour before and said they were in the area and wanted to stop by to see Cameron. Nicole told them to come. I wasn't very happy about it, but well, they're her parents. Cameron received them with his usual excitement, hugs and kisses. They gave him some expensive toy, as always, and then we sat in the living room. Frederick and Helen were looking at the house in a weird way, like evaluating everything, and I could see the wheels turning in their heads. After like half an hour of superficial chat, Frederick said he needed to talk to me about something important. I thought, oh no, Here we go again. Nicole took Cameron outside to play, and Frederick said, Brian, Helen and I have been talking and we think it's time to reconsider that prenup you signed. I just stared at him expressionless, waiting for him to continue. Helen added that circumstances had changed significantly since we signed the agreement. That obviously I'd been very successful and there was no longer any need to have those legal divisions between Nicole and me. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people who had forced me to sign that document precisely because they thought I was a gold digger, who had humiliated me and treated me like trash for years, now wanted me to dissolve the agreement because it turned out I was the rich one. Frederick continued, saying it would be best for the family, that Nicole deserved to be financially protected considering all my success, and that they only wanted what was best for their daughter. He said it so seriously, like he really believed this made sense. I stayed quiet for a moment, just looking at them, and then said in the calmest voice I could, let me see if I understand correctly. 8 years ago, you forced me to sign a prenup because you assumed I was going to be a failure who would live off Nicole's money. But now that my business is successful, you want to cancel it so Nicole can have access to my money. Is that right? Frederick turned red and said it wasn't like that they had just been being cautious at that time, that any parent would do the same. Helen added that it had never been personal, that they were just protecting their daughter. I let out a sarcastic laugh and said, sure, it wasn't personal. You just thought I was a useless person, incapable of supporting his family. The conversation got tense immediately. Frederick raised his voice, saying they had supported my business, that Nicole had helped me financially at the beginning, that without their family I wouldn't have gotten to where I was. I responded that I had repaid every penny Nicole lent me, with interest too, because I knew exactly what they thought of me, that my success had nothing to do with them or their money, that it was the result of my 14-hour workdays for years. Helen tried to calm the situation, saying they only wanted what was best for everyone. But I was already fed up. I told them the agreement stayed exactly as it was, that if it was good enough when they thought I was poor, it should be perfect now that I'm rich. Frederick exploded. He started yelling at me that I was ungrateful, that his family had done a lot for me, that Nicole had sacrificed her career to support me, and that I was now turning my back on the family. I yelled back that his family had never done anything for me except treat me like trash, that the only support I received was from Nicole and I'd already compensated for that, and that their sudden interest in my financial well-being was transparent and pathetic. Helen started crying, that dramatic crying some women do when they don't get what they want, saying she never thought I'd be so cruel to them. Nicole ran in because she heard the shouting and asked what was happening. Frederick told Nicole they needed to talk to her alone, but I said no, that anything they had to say they could say in front of me. Frederick ignored that and told Nicole directly that she had to choose, that it was her family or it was me, that if she stayed with me while I treated them so badly, then they could no longer have a relationship with her. I couldn't believe he was doing that, like really giving his daughter an ultimatum. Nicole was in shock. She looked both devastated and angry, and told them that was ridiculous, that she loved her family but that I was her husband and the father of her child. Frederick just repeated that she had to choose, and that he hoped she'd make the right decision. They grabbed their things and left, leaving Nicole crying in the living room, and Cameron confused, asking why Grandma and Grandpa were angry. The next few days were horrible. Frederick and Helen started bombarding Nicole with messages, calls, emails, saying I was manipulating her, that she deserved someone better, that her family would always be there for her if she decided to leave me. They sent her articles about divorces, information about lawyers, basically trying to brainwash her into leaving me. Nicole was devastated, cried constantly, didn't know what to do. I tried to comfort her, but I was also furious because these assholes couldn't simply accept they'd been wrong about me from the start. I decided to do something drastic. I told my lawyer to calculate exactly how much money Nicole had lent me during the first years of the business, with compound interest at a generous rate, and I prepared a check for that amount plus a considerable extra. I called Frederick and told him I wanted to meet to resolve this. He arrived at my office with Helen, both with satisfied faces like they thought I was going to give in. I put the check on the desk and told them there was all the money Nicole had lent me, every penny and more, and that with that, any debt I had with their family was eliminated. Now, I literally owed them nothing, and they owed me nothing. Frederick didn't even touch the check. He said this wasn't about money. It was about respect and family, that I had insulted them, that I didn't accept their guidance, that I was pulling Nicole away from them. Helen added that they only wanted their daughter to be happy, and that clearly I wasn't making her happy, considering all the recent stress. I told them the only stress in Nicole's life came directly from them, that they'd been making her feel guilty for years for marrying me, and that if they really loved her, they'd respect her decisions. Frederick got up and said this. Conversation was pointless. That, obviously, I was a lost cause, and that they would continue supporting Nicole when she finally opened her eyes. Things escalated even more. Frederick and Helen started showing up unannounced at our house, demanding to speak with Nicole. I wouldn't let them in, which caused scenes at the door with them yelling that I was keeping their daughter prisoner. The neighbors started noticing. It was incredibly awkward. Nicole finally agreed to meet with them without me present, thinking maybe they could have a civilized conversation. It was a disaster. They spent 3 hours trying to convince her I was manipulative, controlling, that I was only with her for her last name now that I had money and wanted social connections. Nicole defended our marriage, but she came out of that meeting completely emotionally exhausted. One night, like 2 weeks after all that drama, we were lying in bed and Nicole was crying again. I asked her what she needed from me, how I could help. She said she loved her parents, but they were completely wrong, that they'd been treating me badly for years, and that she'd been a coward for not defending me more firmly before. She said she understood now how that prenup had made me feel, that her parents had basically assumed the worst about me without giving me a real chance. I told her it wasn't her fault, that she'd always supported me where it really mattered. That conversation was important because we were finally completely on the same page. The next day, Frederick and Helen showed up again. This time, Nicole confronted them before I could say anything. She told them they had to stop doing this, that they were damaging their relationship with her, that Brian was her husband and the father of her child and deserved respect. Frederick tried to interrupt her, but Nicole wouldn't let him. She kept talking, saying they'd treated Brian like he was inferior from the day they met him, that the prenup had been humiliating and unnecessary, and that now that Brian had proven to be successful, they simply couldn't accept they'd been wrong all this time. Helen tried the crying tactic again, but Nicole told her it didn't work anymore, that it was time for them to face their own classism and prejudices. Frederick said something that basically sealed his fate. He said they had built their success with hard work and family values, and that people like me, people from ordinary families, simply didn't understand how real wealth and society worked. He said it with such disdain that even Nicole was speechless. I laughed, literally laughed in his face, and told him my dad, the high school coach, had done more to build good people than he had in his entire life, selling overpriced properties to desperate people. That my mom, the coffee shop manager, had worked harder in one day than he did in his entire week. That my success was precisely because I came from a family that taught me the value of real work, not living off rents, and inherited properties. Nicole finally told her parents they needed to leave and not come back until they could treat her family with respect. She defined family as Brian, Cameron, and herself. She told them they would have to earn the right to be part of Cameron's life again, that it wasn't automatic just because they were grandparents. Frederick looked at her with this expression of absolute betrayal and told her she'd regret choosing me over them someday. Nicole responded that the only thing she regretted was not confronting them years ago. Helen tried to hug Nicole, but she pulled away and asked them to leave. They finally left. But Helen yelled from the door that they'd always have their doors open when Nicole came to her senses. That night, we blocked their numbers on our phones, blocked them on all social media, and basically cut them completely out of our lives. Nicole cried a lot the first few days, and I felt guilty because I knew she was losing the relationship with her parents because of me. But she assured me it was her decision, that she'd finally seen who they really were and couldn't continue tolerating that behavior. Cameron asked about his grandparents a few times at first. We explained in the simplest way possible that sometimes adults have disagreements and need time apart. He's a 5-year-old kid. He didn't completely understand, but he accepted it. It's been like 4 months since then. We haven't heard anything from Frederick and Helen directly, though Nicole heard through other relatives that they're telling everyone I brainwashed their daughter and pulled her away from them. That I'm an opportunist who, now that he has money, wants to isolate Nicole from her real family. The irony of this whole situation still leaves me speechless. For years, they treated me like trash because they thought I was poor. And now they treat me like trash because I'm rich. There's no way to win with people like that. Honestly, my business keeps growing. Nicole is considering going back to work now that Cameron is in school, and honestly, our relationship is stronger than ever after all this. There's something liberating about cutting toxic people out of your life, even if it's family. My parents have been more present. They spend time with Cameron, and he adores them. George teaches him football in the yard, and Barbara takes him to the coffee shop on Saturdays, where he pretends to be the manager. It's simple. It's real. It's what we needed. Sometimes Nicole gets sad, especially on important dates where normally her parents would be present. But when I ask her if she regrets how we handled everything, she always says no, that it was the right thing. That prenup is still there, signed and filed, a permanent reminder of how much they despised me. The difference is now I don't care anymore because I proved they were completely wrong, and Nicole knows it too. That's enough for me, I guess.